This is Harry Man back, Francesco from Rome, Italy. And you're listening to the Spiral Out podcast with your host, Chris West.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spiral Out podcast. I'm your host, Chris West. On today's show, we have Sean Dietrich, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is an artist out of, where did you say? Well,
Washington State.
Washington State. We met at Sonic Temple, right?
Yes. Yeah. You got that shirt?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I wore it today.
Nice.
You had this booth up, and you had all your art up, and you were selling a bunch of stuff, or hopefully you were selling a bunch of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Those are good shows.
But you're actually, I think, the first artist I've had on the podcast that hasn't done a show poster yet, or at least that I don't know about.
I haven't. I have done a few album covers for people, but, friends, bands, but no show posters.
Which is odd to me because if you look at your art, it's very show postery.
They just don't pay.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I never, I don't know, have reached out. My friend, or an artist acquaintance of mine, Bo, he just finished up a poster for Sublime, and he had connected me with the show poster company he was working through, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. We should talk about something." And then they just don't get back to you, so it, I don't know how a lot of these artists do it. I think they probably put up with a lot of shit to get their art on posters, or they know the bands, or not saying there's some magic to it. I know there's companies that do it, but I have worked with so many companies and have had, to push through so much corporate frustration, and that, yeah, I if they come to me, I'd be happy to do it, but.
Wait, you may not be big in the show poster world, but I think a very similar world is the cannabis world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm probably in the top 2 or 3 artists that do artwork for the cannabis industry, and I was one of the first, if not the first, to put fine art, like high polished fine art, on rolling trays, grinders, accessories, stuff like that. Before my art came out on the OCB rolling trays, there was only pot leaves or a skull or that raw tray, the brown one that just says raw across it. But nobody had really put artwork, on a tray. And if they had, it was small scale. I just didn't know or didn't see it. So not to say I was the first, but definitely the first to get it mass produced and out there.
What I remember seeing when I was a kid was like they would have like the Ninja Turtles, but all of their like different colored things would be the wrong color. It'd be like non-licensed
Yeah.
Characters and whatnot. Nothing like what you're doing. And again, I always find this to be the hardest question talking to artists, is having them describe their style, I guess, because I'm terrible at it. And I always feel like a dummy, but I'd like to get your interpretation of what your own style is.
Sure. I think, after so many decades of being asked that question, it really comes down, I think, to basically who influenced me. So you can kind of see that story. Growing up, I literally learned to paint by watching Bob Ross, and as weird and chaotic and
That's not weird.
different as my art is now.
That man's a national treasure.
Yeah, and I remember just having all the paint supplies, and my dad getting, pissed that the paint thinner smelled, and but yeah, doing landscapes. Norman Rockwell was a huge influence because of the just very caricaturesque way of how he drew people. So when I look at his paintings, I see like, I just loved how he drew his characters, and, the people. I mean, even if they were real people that he met, it was just, they came out very cool looking, and they weren't like, just the old master style where it was a dude just sitting there looking, at you, and to see that much emotion and um, posing and just how the characters could really make you feel something. So that kind of pulled me in that direction. And then when I was about 15, I got into comic books.
Let me guess the one that got you, if you don't mind, because I
Go.
kind of see it. Is it heavy metal?
No, that came later.
Okay.
Or maybe earlier, but I didn't know it. My uncle actually read Heavy Metal magazine, I believe. If he hears this and I'm lying, sorry, Kurt. But I think he showed me the movie because when I was like I was raised by my grandparents. My mom and I lived, she was a single mom, so my uncle was only 6 years older than me. Um, and we used to act out Dungeons and Dragons. This was late 70s, early 80s. I was like 3, 4, 5 years old. He would have like sticker packs of like all the Greek, like Medusa and, all the Clash of the Titans. We'd watch that and Star Wars. So, but I believe he mentioned heavy metal maybe later in my high school years. Uh, my first comic was I remember it vividly. I walked into 7-Eleven when they used to still have the spinning racks of comics, and I bought Wolverine number 15. My buddy Chris, who took me in there, was like, I think you'll like this book because it's like super violent and Wolverine's kind of an asshole. And he just seems like right up the line of characters that you would enjoy. And he was right.
What happens in that book? I'm fairly familiar with a lot of Marvel, and I don't mean like the movies. I I read quite a bit of comics. I'm trying to
Sure.
remember what happened in Wolverine number
Um,
15, just to see what caught you, what grabbed you.
Well, I think it was just the character, and he has blades coming out of his hand and
Right.
it's butchering people. Like, okay, at that time I was big into industrial music and all the weird film shit, and I think David Lynch and Lost Highway and all that was around the same time. And
You're watching Eraserhead a lot.
yeah, and getting, yeah, friends that would have old VHS videos of just, horror films that weren't on the mainstream. And I believe it was the Gehenna Stone affair or Gehenna Stone. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it at all right. But I think that was the story arc, and I think it was one where Wolverine was over in Asia
Oh
and
yeah, cool.
fighting whatever the Yakuza or the Hand
the
or
hand,
yeah, like whatever generic Asian mob group terrorized Wolverine.
right.
So.
All
Um,
right, so you got into the comic books. Are you already drawing at this point?
I am. I've been drawing since I was like 4.
Oh
I
wow.
told my mom, I say this in every interview. I told my mom when I was 4 or 5, I was going to be an artist when I grew up. It was her favorite story. Anytime she came to a Comic-Con or met any of my friends or fans that would talk in art, she'd be like, "Oh yeah, he came to me when I was a little kid." And she's like, he never looked back. Like there was never any other career choice or any other thing that interested me. Music for a little bit. Yeah, so I was already drawing at that point, but I was doing character based stuff, and I thought I was going to go for like Mad Magazine or Cracked, or I was like, that seems to kind of fit where, because I was pretty confused about. I was like, I don't want to be a painter in the traditional sense. Galleries look boring. The whole art world looks boring, and snobby, and I was like, I don't know if I'll fit in there. And then I was yeah, once I got into comics, and then once I discovered Todd McFarlane, because I was hanging out with a bunch of people that were doing superhero comics, and I started to try and draw in the superhero style. And then I was like, fuck, man, we're all drawing the same thing and we all look the same. And I said, this is kind of lame. And then, when McFarlane came out, I was like, blown away. I was like, finally, someone who gets it, who actually puts that much hyper detail under their work. And then I discovered Sam Keith and his artwork, and he's the reason all the pinup girls I draw have like 47-foot hair, and definitely those would be the two biggest comic influences, on
Uh,
my artwork.
Todd McFarlane, creator Spawn,
And Sam Keith,
and
creator of the Max. Yeah.
yeah. I want to look up.
and early Sandman artist. I mean, later on, after
Neil Gaiman, right?
Neil Gaiman. Yeah. Oh, I thought you said Neil Diamond. I'm like, I
It
don't know if he was involved.
might have been a little bit.
Yeah.
Just- maybe Neil Gaiman listened to Neil Diamond while doing Sandman. You never
That
know.
would have been awesome.
Ba ba ba. Sorry, I can't. So when did because I have questions about when you're an adult, but I'm still very curious in how you developed your style. So you're doing Todd McFarlane. I mean, you're getting influenced by Todd McFarlane and Max Comics and Mad Magazine. Because I can see the Rockwell-ness, right? Um, and then it I feel like it goes not super fantasy, but it like whimsical, or I don't know. I don't know the right descriptive words, but
Well, and this kind of falls into the question, we're going through. Your original question was describe my style. One big thing is I don't like getting pigeonholed in subject matter. There's too many artists out there that are like, I only paint waves, or I only paint, mushrooms, or I only paint this or that, or and you're like, because they're like, that's me, I'm that guy. And it's like, but don't you have anything else inside your head to get out? I mean, for me, it seems really impossible to, as an artist, pick a style of art or pick a subject matter and just go, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I mean, if you are an artist and art is your life, then, and your life is ever changing. I mean, unless you have one of the most boring lives on the face of the planet, I don't, it really eludes me how certain artists can mentally, and maybe that's why they are reclusive. Most of them or have anxiety. It's because they're stuck drawing the same thing, and it's like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day. I don't know. But for me, I got, and stylistically too. If you
there's
look,
definitely. Sorry,
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was
I'm
going to
just
say,
I'm noticing all the different styles because I do see like Ralph Steadman in there. I
yeah.
see,
If you
and
go to my
not
DeviantArt account,
yeah. I'm
that
right
will
there.
give you, okay, so there's 600 or 500 paintings there. If you start at the beginning, that's all my early comic art, and then you can see the entire progression. It's one of the reasons I've kept that account open, is it's a really good kind of portfolio of like from the early comic days of 2000. I think I've been on that site for 20 years.
Oh wow.
I used to know my DeviantArt number. I think I was like number 360 some thousand. Now they have like 40 million people. So it was
You were relatively early.
relatively early. And it's been a really cool just portfolio to have online. It's, that way where I don't have to update it, because my website I like to put, like the, newer stuff and then kind of flush it out as I sell through prints. But that DeviantArt account is definitely kept a nice portfolio. And so for the comic style, when I was getting frustrated doing uh the superhero stuff, I was also just getting into like to bring music into this, because music has been probably the biggest influence on my art. I had just gotten a copy, 1989. My buddy comes to me, gives me a blank cassette tape, or a cassette tape that he dubbed. He's like, "Here, listen to this. It'll change your life." And it was Nine Inch Nails' "Pretty Hate Machine." And at that time, I think Pink Floyd, Casey's Top 40, whatever was on the radio. I really hadn't had, I think, a little Public Image Limited. I think my buddy gave me a tape of theirs. And so I listened to that and was blown away. I was like, holy shit, this is way different than um,
Anything else that was out at that?
anything, And then from there, I had friends that got me into Thrillkill Cult and KMFDM and Ministry. And then I started watching Headbangers Ball and 120 Minutes, and they started playing those videos. And so I was watching like the Stigmata video and yeah, Had Like a Hole and all the early industrial videos, Front 242, just, Neubauten videos where they're just wrestling with microphones that are connected to a shopping cart, to make noise. I'm like, all right, I need to do this with art. So if you look at my early comic art, it is all dark splashed black ink and a razor blade for highlights, and to make it as grungy as possible, or an X-Acto blade, as not worried about anatomy too much or panel composition, or it's just whatever felt right. And that was really the beginning of like stylistically painting how it felt right, as opposed to worrying about if it fits into any of the artistic rules that I was taught in high school. And I think that really helped me vision wise, and developing a style, because I think, I mean, obviously I'm very comfortable with what I do now and
Sure.
I think it works. And that was just kind of my different path I took to get there.
What comic book was this that you? Because I see panels with words, and so I'm guessing you um, did the illustrations and somebody else wrote it, or did you write and
I
do the
wrote and
illustration?
drew everything. Yeah. So I do write as well. I haven't done a lot lately, but yeah. So Industriocide was the first book. It was a 120-page graphic novel. It originally came out as a 6-issue miniseries. The first 3 issues came out, then the publisher went bankrupt, or I don't know, mismanaged his money. We had orders through previews for the last 3 issues, and then he just didn't fulfill. So James Taylor, not the singer, but publisher of Rorschach Entertainment, he hit me up at Comic-Con in San Diego one year. We were both actually having our portfolios reviewed by Dark Horse. So and he said, well, I'm actually going to start a comic company and I can publish your book as a graphic novel next year if you want. I said, yeah, sure. And so I did my review. Dark Horse was actually interested, but I was like, I don't know. I kind of like this dude. Let's just go with it. And so Industriocide came out first. That's most of the art that you're seeing at the beginning of the DeviantArt page with the little kid and the teddy bear. And
Yeah,
um,
the black and white stuff.
yeah. And then I put a book out called Fervor, which was about like a call girl, and then one called Mess. And then I did one book through, I think it was 216 Inc. It was a company out of Philly called Catalepsy. And so those are the 32-page one shots, and then a 120-page graphic novel. And that was pretty much the extent of my comic years. Um, they did take me quite a while to put out. I was definitely not. I'm a pretty fast painter, but as far as putting a whole book together, that was
Yeah, 120 with
yeah,
multiple artworks per page, and
yeah.
then not only that, writing it. I
And
couldn't even imagine.
yeah, I have another book, Heart Murmur, that's ready to go. I wrote it 25 years ago, 20 years ago, and but I just couldn't see myself doing sequential art again. Or I think one of my biggest problems is drawing that small. Like my comic pages now would have to be 2 by 3 feet, or which sure it's
Could
possible,
you?
but now that I'm used to painting that big, it'd be tough.
Yeah, could you not paint big and then make it smaller on digitally?
Possibly. I'm just not a fan of digital a lot. I mean, I could do it digitally. I mean, well, that's a good thing to bring up, because I just started about a year ago using Procreate to sketch out all my paintings, so I could zoom in and really get the detail right and whatnot, and then I'll project it on the bigger panels, and that's been working brilliantly. The efficiency is incredible, and especially with the pinup girls, where I use a very specific model. Let's say there's, especially on DeviantArt, there's about 3 or 4 photographers that I use their pose packs, and um, so I'll import that, get the basic outline in Procreate, and then I'll use that to base the model off of. And then, but going from that to paper and then trying to translate it to canvas, without projecting it, it just loses so much. And so being able to just project the sketch onto the canvas and then go in with ink and paint after that has been a huge help. Uh,
Uh, let me jump back for a second. I'm very curious about this model pose pack. So there's a photographer you work with that takes pictures of women, and you use some of those photos as inspiration and or for poses and
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah, stock. It's just stock poses. I think there's Senshi stock. I think there's one just called like um, I'd have to, if I saw it on the DeviantArt page, but basically if you just put like stock images, pinup poses or something, there's guys that just photograph models. Oh, it's this week, it's this model. She's in 15 different poses, but it's a lot of it started because comic artists wanted poses. And there's people that will just do more of the pinup stuff, and then there's people that'll do action shots where they'll jump on a trampoline with two guns, or a sword or something, so you can actually get them flying through the air. It really helps. I mean, I've got friends like my buddy Ali Garza. He draws, comics professionally, and that guy can just draw whatever, whenever, pose wise. And I'm not there yet. Like,
No, because I the reason I'm curious is I've slowly, and I haven't shown anybody anything, but I've slowly been dabbling in art, and I'm going coming from a place that has zero ability to draw. Excuse me, and I'm learning these like tricks, like projecting stuff onto a canvas. I'm trying to stay as far away from digital stuff as I can to start off because I
yeah,
want to learn. But yeah, it's just crazy how many tips and tricks and tools and things that are out there that the average person, when they see a drawing, may just think like, "Wow, how did he come up with that on the spot?"
yeah,
And it's like,
yeah,
well, it's just like anything else. You have to work at it. You have to, get
yeah. Well, and with painting, it's a lot different. I mean, comics, it's every pose, every panel has to have, a team. You got teams that are fighting each other. I mean, that's what they worked on, was knowing how to draw people in every conceivable pose. And then for painters, we're picking out that perfect pose. The one that's going to really bring the painting home and convey the message in one panel. So, like, if you had to draw a comic, but it only had to be, you had to pick that one perfect panel. That's where painting comes in, and how it's a little bit different. What I would love to be able to just sit down and be like, oh yeah, I'm just going to crank this out, and but it's one thing I never really studied. I never did life drawing. I never did a lot of um comic art in the sense of studying anatomy, heavily. I mean, I would go through all the basics. I know how to divide the face up and do the little skeleton thing, and all that hoo-ha. Uh but yeah, just the photographers are really cool to work with, and it's awesome because you don't have to deal with the model. You don't have to hire someone and do all the, oh, let's set up a shoot. And it's like, you go on, some are free and they just want credit, or they just want you to send them what you painted. I mean, most of it, they don't even, I think the one that I use, I pay like $2.50 for like a photo pack. And then it comes with a commercial license, which is awesome. So
yeah, that's super. And it in my opinion, whatever works. You obviously have carved out your own pathway in the art world, and uh, whatever you can do to keep your head above water. I would imagine.
yeah, yeah, it's always about experimentation, and like I said, not pigeonholing myself and hopping around. And I get bored easily, with most everything. When it
Yeah,
comes to,
I get you.
I don't know. It's why I don't do like you were just a designer con. And it's not that I don't play well with other artists. I love to collaborate. And we can talk later about a podcast that I'm building out that's actually going to be for helping artists. But a lot of I just got really off put by the whole artist image, or when I
Club,
meet artists and they were so like, nothing against, trying not to be mean. But
not be mean.
you've been to art
Be
fairs,
mean.
right? And
Yeah.
you've been to Comic Cons, and half the artists sit there looking like they're, like, if you spoke to them, they would just shatter into a million pieces. Or they're not all like me, where they could be a little more. And I used to be super shy, but I was like, dude, if this is gonna work, I got to get a personality. And
I
uh,
think the ones with personality definitely rise, you know, um,
like
like the
anything, yeah.
cream. Yeah. But they're for sure, again, being at designer con, and I probably talked to 30 different printmaker or just artists, let's just say artists. And
Yeah, I mean, well, they're terrified to, and this is one of the things that I want to start getting into with interviews and podcasting and book writing and maybe guest speaking at some comic cons and designer cons and stuff, but really getting out there and like, helping these artists realize that, you don't have to live life in fear. You don't have to be reclusive. There is no image. You don't have to be the cool person with 900 piercings and a leather jacket to be like, oh, I'm the artist, and then have like this whole manifesto of what you're about. I mean, have that. That's cool.
Yeah, if that's what
But
you want to do.
yeah, but it's like your core values and your, taking this seriously as a career, there needs to be a refresh as far as that's concerned. And, not worrying about what other people think. A lot of artists, the biggest thing that, I find is that they're terrified to talk about what they do because they're afraid someone's going to rip them off
Yeah, that
or
happens a
steal
lot.
their technique. I got news for you. You're already being ripped off. People are like, if
Yeah.
you're out there and you're showing your art, somebody's already looked at that and went, that's cool. I'm taking that.
Yeah, it's just about how are you making it.
Yeah, exactly. Paying more attention to that. No one's going to steal your job, because it's art. It's not really a job. Yeah, I get it. You can lose. Somebody else can go into Sony and be like, I do this better than this dude or whatnot. But as far as your art's concerned, it's what you built. It's you. And if you do have a style and you've actually put yourself into it, as opposed to, like I said, just picking one thing and being like, I'm that guy, because that's the only thing that people have reacted positively to, or I'm too afraid to experiment because it might put a dent in my income or any of
So I'm
those
gonna
other mental blocks.
so
That's
I'm gonna ask you two questions.
okay.
And these came up frequently at DesignerCon.
Hmm.
Uh, One, do you identify as an artist? Because about half the artists I talked to did not. They're like, oh, I'm more of a technician. I'm more of this. I'm more of that. Being calling myself an artist is kind of bougie.
Okay. I do 100% identify as an artist. It's only bougie if, like I said, when I was young and I was looking at the art world and I looked at snobby galleries and all that, and oh, I'm an artist, and that whole ethos of um or that, yeah, the air of superiority that kind of comes along with that. It doesn't mean you have to be that way. If you're an artist, like I will make a distinction between being technically proficient and being an artist. I think an artist is someone that this is their profession. I think there's a lot of technically proficient people out there, but I think an artist comes when you have found a way to create that link between your life and what you got up here in your head and your art. So when your art actually speaks for who and what you are and what you're thinking, and I think that would probably be my distinction between what makes an artist. Not necessarily that you're selling stuff, um, because there's obviously a lot of talented people out there selling their art. But like I said, you meet them and they just tend to be like not happy that they're doing it, or I mean, you got to have a passion for this. You have to. It's like you'll hear it from every musician and every comic artist and every. You're not in it for the money. You have to be in it by the passion, and and it's true. It's cliche and it's overused sometimes, but if you don't have that connection with your art, then I don't think you're an artist. But being an artist is there's nothing wrong with titling yourself that. I don't
No,
think there's anything bougie about it.
I don't think so either. It's just some.
Yeah. Well,
And
and
then
and if if you look at most artists' paychecks, I don't think there's anything bougie about it.
no,
So
not at all. The second one out of those two that I thought were um, the second question that I think is very interesting is you touched on this before is I don't know how and I'll cut this until I ask it right, but there's a lot of artists that will do something and it becomes very popular, and then when they themselves become less popular and then have to go back to the well, let's say. Um,
I try and do that. Uh, I love experimenting. I love saying, "Hey, I know you guys liked all the Alice in Wonderland shit I did, but that was one contract. Now I'm going back to the World War II pinup, or I'm going to the more goddess style art, or what I'm doing right now actually is I've done about 20 some years of live painting at nightclubs and festivals and stuff like that. So early 2000s in San Diego, I was doing live art 6 nights a week for about 3 years. That's how I was getting my name out there. They were only 3 4-hour paintings. So I actually went through and picked 10 of the ones that I really enjoyed, and I'm redoing them, but giving them studio treatment and taking the time and giving them 15 20 years more practice, and what would that look like now in my style? And but they were insanely weird. Guys with 500 needles shoved in his mouth with a glass of wine full of pills, or, you know, um, stuff that was more making fun of the scene that I was seeing, or the weirdos at the nightclub, or, so you will alienate some of your fans if they're only there. So for instance, the Alice in Wonderland book, they loved my art. The people that bought it, they absolutely loved what I did with Alice. They whatnot, but a lot of them are Alice fanatics. They're not Sean Dietrich fanatics. So that's fine. And if they don't like my other art, well, we had a good time together. It's kind of like a spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend, or, sometimes it doesn't work out, but you shouldn't let that worry you, because if you get comfortable, that's when you're going to start to suck. And I think that's gonna do more damage to your career and your, I think, art mentality, because 'cause you're not working your brain to try out other ideas. You're not jumping around and experimenting, and, um, it's like, do you see the biggest actors out there? They don't all act the same part. They're doing the greatest ones are hopping all over the place and doing different characters, and that's kind of I think a great analogy for, or something to
Sure,
look at,
for
for
sure. And I think where it relates into my experience with this is, I have all those Tool posters behind me, right?
Mhm.
I'm a Tool fan, but on some level, on a lot of levels, actually, it's opened my eyes to different different artists. Right now, I have preferences. Right, I have favorite artists now, as opposed to when before I got into posters, I could I could barely name maybe a couple.
Sure.
I could name Norman Rockwell and I can what's his name I just mentioned earlier,
Bob
Ralph
Ross.
Steadman. Yeah, Ralph Steadman, Bob Ross,
Yeah.
Alex Gray. But now, I mean, the dozens are in my brain at all times now, and you have all this eclectic styles and whatnot. But yeah, no, it's art is a
Yeah, but I think artists need to explore that world. I think a lot of artists get too wrapped up in being an artist. They all quit their day jobs too early, and that's a horrible thing, because then you're just stressed, and that doesn't create great art.
and broke.
And broke, and that's not an environment. I mean, yeah, great art comes through suffering, but it doesn't mean you have to create that suffering and put it upon yourself. I mean, it's all about balance and taking that time to really. I mean, I assess my life on a daily basis. Every night I sit back and I'm just like, am I doing enough? Why'd I fuck off and play games instead of getting this commission done? Or why'd I do that? And okay, we got to get this, if something like that happens, or if everything's going swimmingly, it's like, okay, let's take a look at this industry I'm in. Like, cannabis industry right now is starting to get a little stale, a little boring. How do we, on my end, with what I'm doing, kind of spice it up a bit to make sure at least my booth and my presence in this industry is, um, where I want it to be. And
Yeah,
maybe,
throw the left instead of keep throwing the jab.
yeah, exactly. I gave a speech once at ASD, which is a big convention in Vegas, where if you own a shop, you come buy all the products. And so I gave a speech on marketing, and it was funny because there was all these corporate people, and they're all sitting there, and they're like, well, this guy's going to give us, he looks like one of the cool kids, maybe, he's not dressed like us, or whatever. He's the artist for OCB. They knew who I was, and which was the biggest rolling paper company in the world. I mean, I was doing some pretty substantial art for them, and that was getting out there. But I told them, and they all look confused. I was like, stop using green and pot leaves. And every other, I go, look at what everybody else is doing and go the opposite direction. I go, especially when it's cliche like that. You can't tell me that, like, when you got into the industry, you just had to have a pot leaf on your logo. Like, there was nothing else inside your head. There was no other passion for growing or distribution or packaging design or the culture itself, which is in desperate need of saving. Um, that didn't attract you to the industry. I mean, obviously, you're in the industry. Most, it's changed since legalization because it's a big cash grab from a lot of corporate people. But the core of it was, you're in your bedroom with your friends in high school smoking weed, listening to Led Zeppelin or listening to cool music, or there's a whole culture
Yeah.
that needs to be nurtured and kept alive, or else it just becomes another boring.
And what would you say?
Well, just keeping the art alive for sure. I mean, making sure, like, if I just did MJ BizCon for the first time, which is the business growing, manufacturing, packaging side of things. It's not the Champ Show, which is the art and culture, glass blowing. If you own a shop, you go in, this is where you outfit it. And MJ BizCon is the big money grow houses. And it probably had the most boring trade show booths. Like, I just, uh, or am working with a company right now that I met there because the guy walked by and looked at the booth and I was live painting. And he was like, "What is this?" He's like, "This is cool." He's like, "This is not supposed to be here," or he kind of had that reaction, and we ended up having a great conversation. Now we're going to do some work together, but it's really funny how there is, and half the people I talked to had no idea what the Champ Show was. And I go, so all this weed you're growing and all this stuff that you're, this industry that you're just trying to make all this money off of, you have no connection with the customer or the culture that you're taking money from or you're trying to be a part of. And it was really eye-opening to see that division. Um, a friend of mine was over at the Bic lighter booth, and these two girls came up and said, "Oh, we didn't know you were in the industry. We thought you only made pens."
Bic is like the,
And
but other
I'm
than
like,
Zippo,
and he
they must
said he
not.
was just flabbergasted. He was like,
That would have been too.
"Yeah."
I
So,
mean, it's like Zippo and Bic, and then occasionally you'll
yeah,
get like a dollar
and
crappy
Zippo too.
clear
I mean,
lighter.
I do art for Zippo. I
Sure.
mean, there's one of my designs right now. And but even that, it's like Zippo is huge, but they brought me in to help them, attach themselves to the culture.
Yeah, because
Like they actually had,
people were tired of buying Zippos with like the Patriots on them,
yeah,
or
100%. Yeah, they didn't want, flaming skulls. I'm gonna buy my mushroom bong, and then can I get that Grim Reaper Zippo to go along with it? So they had the vision and the foresight to go, hey, you know what? They talked to me and they said, yeah, we'd love to put some stuff, your designs on this because obviously it's more in tune with, getting into dispensaries and shops. And I said, that's awesome. I said,
so
most companies don't really look at it that way.
I want to transition a little bit.
Sure.
Um, on your, you've talked about doing these live drawings and at festivals and nightclubs and conventions. W- Do you go into those with a plan of attack, or do you kind of let the?
A little of both. I've done everything from have the painting inked, ready for color, to hey, I have a blank board. Audience, give me 3 words, 3 items, and they'll be like scissors, headless people, and cats, or and then I'll just combine all that into a painting. Really depends on. I know when I was doing it like 6 nights a week in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, I would sometimes try and plan out because I had so many, or I'd do a series where I'd be like, okay, this is all going to be part of this week's series. But a lot of times I would also be like, you know what, this week I'm going to freestyle whatever I walk up to that canvas and I'm feeling right then and there. And that was just to keep my mind sharp. So I didn't
Is
have to
is
continuously
there
research.
is there anything on the Deviant Art site that you can remember you just going up and doing in the moment?
Yeah, let me pull up DeviantArt. Because a lot of those early paintings that you do see after the comic art were all done live. I think in fact, all of them were. I think up until I did like one of my first pinup girls, nothing was done in studio. So most of the paintings that you're seeing were all done in front of an audience, a live studio audience.
Right? Like
Let's see. So
Home Improvement.
yeah. And there's me.
Quick question. I may cut this out, but I'm just curious.
Mhm. Yeah, married. My wife Rachel, super creative as well. Uh, helps me with a lot of like booth design and whatnot, and sculpture. She's doing stop motion animation right now. She's learning that. We're about to put out little films for each painting, and two kids, Maximilian 11 and Guinevere 15.
Did you did
So
you
high school
notice
years.
any? Did you notice any? I don't want to say shift, but does having a family, or how does a family influence your art direction?
Um, it it doesn't really. As far as like what I paint, I mean, my wife will have some opinions about some stuff, and she's definitely very good at that. Like, hey, I don't know if that last one, but uh, I mean, do you mean like that? Like, do I paint different subject matter now because I have kids running around the house, or?
Not necessarily in a way that would restrict you, but you definitely hear about people who like once they have kids, their perspective may change.
Oh, sure,
Or
yeah, but I think for me, it's more just me as a person, and I think that's why I'm really looking forward to putting out my podcast and a new book I'm working on, because it's gotten me to, obviously when you have kids and a wife, you're supposed to get your shit together, and I think I've done a pretty good job of that. Like I said, we're doing well. But also, having to deal with kids' homework and getting them organized, and stuff like that, and now they're at the age where I can actually start giving them some good advice and maybe even a little wisdom, and help them on some real issues, in their life. And I'm like, okay. And I think that is what kind of pushed me to wanting to do more like guest speaking engagements and stuff like that, where I can really kind of help artists, come out of their shell, or help with the business side of things. Or I think in a way that side of the art business has more come out of me than, let's say, my paintings having a different perspective because I have kids.
fair. I have a odd question. You a Charles Bukowski fan?
Absolutely.
I can tell.
Hunter
I don't.
Thompson, Bukowski, Kurt Vonnegut, Jack Kerouac. I mean, I love all those guys.
And the reason I bring up Bukowski is I read somewhere that you would go to bars and gain inspiration from maybe these darker places, not
Yeah,
only like clubs, but um,
huge dive bar fan. Yeah, like
uh,
I actively seek them out on tour, and
so I don't drink, but I am very familiar with the dive bar culture. Um, and again, if somebody listening has never been to a dive bar, they should know what one is.
you are
And
missing out. You
well,
know?
it's a cultural shock, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's where I'm gonna find. Typically, it started on tour. We would get to a town, and I'd be like, okay, best dive bars in Cincinnati or Omaha, or because I knew that's where I was going to find the locals, and then they were going to point me in the right direction to good food, or great stories about the city, or hidden stuff. I mean, they're the ones that keep the past alive generally for a city too. It's like they're the ones that they're in a dive bar complaining about how the city, oh, it's gotten all modern, and remember the times when it was, so I love hearing those stories, and best times of my painting career have been in dive bars. So,
Now that you have the DeviantArt thing up, can you think of a specific scenario in a dive bar?
um, yeah, there's one called Whiskey Melt, which was kind of like, where's that at? Well, let me make sure it's even on here.
Oh, one, two.
Yeah. See,
You
mine's
said
all
that.
on one page, just scrolls down.
You said it's a guy with a melty face.
Yeah. I mean, there's that. There's one called Drinking with Death. It's basically a dude drinking a tall boy of PBR. And it was a joke against how, for some reason, if I'm just drinking a can of PBR, a 12-ounce can, I can go through them. But those tall boys seem to last forever. So death has come to take this old guy, and he's just bored at the bar. He's got like 18 shots in front of him, and this guy's just chilling. Like, no, my tall can's
Huh.
not done yet. Uh,
I like the one. Uh, there's like a guy in front of McDonald's.
oh, with his heart blown out?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's called the McRib. And then if you go, I don't know, maybe a couple pages or a page, it's maybe one, two, three, four, five, maybe 10 more paintings. You'll see one where it's a dude that's basically strung up by his
I see
digestive
it.
system.
I see it.
That's Sexy American. And then there's two paintings after that. You'll see a dude with a McDonald's arches shoved in his back. So that was a whole series I did based off like our obsession with fast food. Um and then there's like a couple paintings after the McDonald's one. There's like a girl in a blue dress, and that was about like the California education system cutting out creativity, art and music and drama. So yeah, like it's a good example of how I hop around, and then you see all the World War II and the pinup, and there's
Yeah.
some Fear and Loathing, and there's a kids book I did
Yeah,
with my wife, where her and her friend Lexi wrote this book about, A is for Apple, about kids eating their veggies, and um,
I see it.
yeah. So I just can't stick with one thing for too long, and
Because your even though your subject matter changes,
yeah, that'll come through. I mean, and obviously as it gets to the newer stuff, like the line work is more detailed and cleaner. I've gotten a lot more hyper detailed with the inking, and um, it's cool too to see I love this page because you can see how raw and very fast everything was painted in the beginning.
I usually, when I'm interviewing artists, like I'll go through their entire Instagram and you can see like a progression from the beginning of their Instagram to wherever they seem to be.
Yeah, this gives you, what, 15 years pre-Instagram, 10 years. I mean, it goes back a ways. So, and that's why I keep it around. Like I said, it's just been an awesome gallery um, to have available to kind of show people like, oh, if you want to know, check this out, and then you can see everything that I've almost. I mean, this isn't every painting I've ever done, but
So tell me about your work with festivals. How'd that start? Because
so
I don't see
that's
that. I don't see
okay.
that a whole lot. Um,
No,
I'm now more than I have in the past, but there's usually food vendors and yada, XYZ shirt companies. But now it seems like something like Welcome to Rockville or Sonic Temple or um, whatever the other one is. And
Louder Than Life. Yeah,
yeah,
all the Danny Wimmer shows. That's all.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
those are the core shows that I do.
they're almost like mini what is it called? Like markets.
Yeah, yeah, they have vendors. Um,
No,
it,
and a
it's
bunch of vendors.
yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Well, Sonic Temple, where you were at, there was I think there was 8 or 9 vendors, and the rest were all charity groups and sponsors. So it is really hard to get into Wimmer shows because he's got his core group. Myself and Bill Stidham. He's the artist next to me who was doing all the portraits of rock stars, and so we've been, I think, doing Wimmer shows for between 10 and 12 years, depending. He was, I think, a year before me. Um, And I was I started festivals about 13 years ago. My buddy Vincent Gordon, he's another awesome artist. I did a lot of collaborations with him. I've probably done over 30 different paintings with him. His old roommate, I believe this is how we got connected, was security for I don't know, a bunch of rock stars and some big band, but he actually knew somebody over at Insomniac who does Identity Fest, and they do a lot of electronic music festivals. So we got in on Identity Fest, which was a traveling electronic music festival. The headliners that year were like DJ Shadow, Steve Aoki, Crystal Method, and essentially that was my honeymoon. My wife, my wife and I got married, and then we had a Volvo station wagon, a pop up tent trailer with no air conditioning in the trailer, and our 3.5-year-old daughter, uh, and hit the road about 2 months after we got married, and ended up doing this couple Comic Cons on the way, and ended up doing I think maybe like 12 or 13 dates on Identity Fest, and that was our first time doing the shows. I think back now, and I'm like, that was crazy. Just being able to just uproot like that, and but sometimes that's what you got to do. So from there, just getting connected with other promoters, Mosh It Up Clothing, they're the ones that saw my art and they were like, dude, you would do great at these rock shows. You should try Uproar, Metal Mayhem, and then try and get into Rock on the Range, which is now Sonic Temple. And that was my first Danny Wimmer show about 10 years ago. And then it's just grown from there. I've stopped doing Comic Cons. Simply because sitting around for 4.5 days at San Diego, I can make that in like 2 hours at a rock show. So, um, I love
Yeah.
the Comic Cons, but the money is just madness at these shows. So,
Yeah. I mean, my guess is they charge you like what, $300-400 for a booth at a Comic Con. If
oh yeah, try times 10. Like, it's thousands. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it could be anywhere between 4 to 10,000 for a booth, depending on what show it is and whatnot. So it is the money's good, but you got to have a company. You got to have something going, and backing. And I get sponsors every year, and I deal with. I just signed a new deal with Art Rolls, who's going to take over all the manufacturing of all my products, and so they're backing me on this. So it's an event. I mean, it's not just hey, I'm here. Like an art fair where you do only pay $400 or whatever, and you show up, you set your stuff up and sell. Sometimes I miss those days, but you know, nothing's going to compare to selling my art and watching like 50 of the bands I want to see, and
yeah,
nothing can
no,
really top that.
no, not at all. And and when I seen you at the Sonic Temple, you not only were you selling um like smaller products and prints, you sold like a major.
Yeah. 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 We sold some big pieces, some panels. Thomas over at Spirit Printing, I'll give a nice shout out to him. He runs one of the best print shops in the United States, if not the best, out of San Diego. And he can do anything, and he's always experimenting, always trying to come up with the best ways to do posters. And but he handles all my metal and wood and canvas and matte prints, fine art prints. So he makes it easy because I can just take orders at the show and put them in, and he handles printing and drop shipping them. So having relationships like that, where I used to have to print 3 or 4 of each of ones that I thought would sell, and bring them out and hope, and then that would just take up more room in the van. And so having, a few years ago, I switched and I stopped selling stuff off the wall, and it's orders only now for the reproductions. And then, yeah,
Unless
all
they
the
want to buy an
merch.
original.
Originals, yeah. I very rarely bring out an original. That Redheaded Death, I did bring that one out, and but that was only because I didn't have time to run a print. I literally finished it like 3 days before I was due to go on tour, so I had to build this big, like, almost coffin thing that she sat in to be transported safely. And
Now, I uh I find this conversation to be um very enlightening because I feel like most of the people I've talked to or kind of what you were talking about in the beginning, not all of them, but um, struggling. And I'm not saying that you're not struggling, but you definitely seem to have figured out how to carve out a more business savvy uh, niche than what I'm used to. And I'm not saying there isn't anybody that's doing it differently than you, or but it's refreshing, I guess, in some sense, to see that it's it's possible to not only just do the posters, but you're doing lighters, and you've worked with PlayStation, and you've worked with the Paps, and you do the trays, and
Hmm.
you're selling original artwork, and you have all of these different revenue streams.
Yeah, and that's key. Um, one thing I found out early on is monitoring your industry that you're in, and every industry will have ups and downs. When I was in comic books, I started collecting right before and saw the whole speculator thing with Image Comics and all that go down. I saw it crash. I saw indie comics rise again, and so it's looking at what's going to be the hot new thing. Not guessing, but knowing that your industry is going to ebb and flow, and that's why I'm in several different industries. Like I do go out and tour, but I also wholesale to smoke shops my products. I do the rock and roll thing, which I learned obviously with festivals. You can get wiped out by a storm. I was at Blue Ridge Rock Fest this year and dealt with that nightmare. And thankfully, nothing got damaged or destroyed on my end because I knew what I was doing. And but several other people brought in their wimpy little Home Depot tent and it got blown down and all their shit got lost. And so I knew that, I know that just doing festivals is not like, it's a lot of like, I don't want to say luck because I'm not a big believer in that, but really does timing with the weather and um, stuff like utilitarian products. Like I know that in May, it's one of the worst times to do a show in Florida, but that's when Rockville is every year because that's just what they could get. So this year I'm gonna have rain ponchos with my artwork on it because like if it's gonna get rained out, then I'll try and make 10, 20, $30,000 off ponchos, with my artwork or
I get what you're saying.
you
Yeah,
know, and that's
you're
something
just being smart.
a lot of artists don't, they go into this thinking I have talent, people should buy it because it's talented. I don't know, I don't like the whole I don't like. Yeah, I don't like accounting. I don't like business per se. I don't like I do like negotiating deals. I've found that I'm pretty good at that and I enjoy it, but I'd rather be painting like any other artist. And it does take a lot out of you. I mean, thankfully I'm a pretty quick painter. So I do have the time that I can put towards these other things. But a lot of artists have a lot of friends that draw and whatnot. And if they would just group together and help each other handle those side of things. Hey, this weekend we're all helping out Bob over at this art fair. Let's all get together and help him get his stuff together. And then next weekend, this dude's at a Comic Con. We're going to all jump over there and you know um, help him sell or whatnot. Um, my buddy Gary and I were in Denver one year, just cruising the streets. We were there for the High Times Cannabis Cup. It was nighttime. We walked past this bar and hey, look, there's 5 artists in there, all set up selling their stuff. So we went in and we started talking, and I said, "Hey, dude, you pick an artist and I'll pick an artist, and let's be their salesperson for the night." Because we were way more experienced, and so he went and sold this girl's art, and I connected with this other dude who happened to end up knowing Vincent Gordon, this other artist, who lived in Denver, and so we had a connection there. And I said, "Hey, dude, we don't want any money. We're just kind of cruising around. We do this. We're here for high times. Can I sell for you tonight?" And the kid was like, "What?" And I was like, "I'm gonna help sell some stuff tonight because we really want to help out artists." And he was thrilled. And he was just like, "Well, I got a tab going. Just make sure you put some beers on that." And I was like, "Absolutely." So I went and I was like, "All right, first thing we're doing is raising your prices." I'm like, "This is we're gonna teach you about perceived value." A lot of artists too get stuck in that by not charging enough. And I tell artists all the time, if you're gonna sell an original, it better change something in your life. Pay your rent for 6 months, get you that new studio space you wanna rent, buy a new car. That's your original. Selling an original and having enough to eat that night is not cool. And like I said, that means you quit your day job too early. If that's all if you're trying to do the art game thing and your originals are only buying you a Happy Meal or something like that. So
No, I get what you're saying.
yeah. So yeah, knowing your industry, knowing that your market is going to change, making sure you got your fingers in a lot of pies, um, raising your prices. I mean, it's scary. People think, oh, it's too expensive. It's art. It's supposed to be. It's a luxury. It's not a necessity. I mean, it's a necessity in the sense that we need it as a civilization. But buying art, it is a luxury item and should be treated as such. Every artist should treat their art as if it's a Ferrari.
Which leads me to my next question is, where do you think it's going? Where do you think art is going? Where should people?
Um, well, I think, man, there's so many answers to this question. All right, I'll take it kind of one by one. I think artists need to put stock in well, at first I think they need to put in their own pie. And I think a lot of artists need to start, like I said, getting out of that mentality that artist is a bad word. Both making them, like people who won't title themselves because they think it's bougie, but also that it's looked down upon. And it is a very tough industry. We are not actors. We don't have SAG. We don't have agents. We don't have people looking out for us and babying us. We're not musicians. We don't have managers. I do agree that artists are, I think, the tougher breed of all uh,
There's no union for artists.
professions. There's no what?
There's no union for artists.
I don't know. My buddy Bill connected me with a woman that was trying to create one of the first unions for artists, or there might be local stuff that I don't know about, maybe certain industries, like if you're working in the movie industry as an artist, I'm sure there's something. But if you're just an independent artist, I haven't come across any real help. I mean, it's, you know,
Fair enough.
uh,
I didn't mean to push you off track.
no, that's fine. That's a great question. I mean, I don't think many artists, it's like trying to find an agent. Like I've tried to, I don't want an agent. I would never use one, but I've always tried to research them a little in case somebody had asked me that question, like why don't you use an agent? Or um, and especially with the internet, when you title artist agent, it usually comes up with musician.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you have to put like fine art or something like that. Um, so yeah, really knowing that if you're technically proficient, the art's only going to get better because you practice more. So take that stress off your plate that you have to get better. You got to put all this mental energy into just practice, draw. You're going to get better. Um, really taking the time to spend a part of your day thinking about the business side of it. Locally, what can I do? Are there art fairs? Are there craft breweries that need labels? Are there uh, dispensaries that every company is every shop, every store, everybody's always trying to make that buck and they're always trying to get out there and advertise and be unique. So set up and live paint at their show and trade them for something. Or I mean, the barter system's alive and well. If there's certain things that you can trade for in your life that you don't have to pay for that saves you cash, a local store that you shop at that's like, hey dude, I know I bring up the dispensary because I've there's a few that I've done live art at. And I mean, I sold my stuff. I didn't trade for weed, but you could.
You could.
I
You
think it'd be
definitely could.
illegal for them, but yeah, start local. A lot of people miss local and they try and go like, oh, I got to go do this big Comic Con in San Diego. It's the and it's like, yeah, that's a huge expense too. It could cost you $5,000-6,000 to maybe the booth's $400, but travel, hotel, printing. So starting local and really building that fan base up. I tell people too, getting out to live art for me worked because I loved being out there and it creates a way more intimate experience. I hate selling online. I hate social media. I think it's cold and impersonal. But when I'm at a rock show and somebody comes up and you can see their jaw drop and they buy you a beer and you have a great story, or I've had people cry at the booth because the painting meant so much, and or quit their jobs. I was a lawyer. I really wanted to get into art. Now you inspire me. But making that human connection and that much more intimate connection, um, it means a lot to these people. And I think that too for the artist. It's like maybe you are shy or you're a little reclusive. Put a little more effort into, like, it means a lot when the artist talks to the fan or friend. And if they
Yeah,
come up
it
and they're huge
does.
fans of your art and you're just kind of like some moody rock star or it's like that's not
Which
really,
I've run it.
you know.
I've run into both, and what I've noticed is the artists that that are like proactive and or talk to the fans and or out there doing interviews and whatnot and talking about a whole litany of subjects. It makes you want to put your skin in the game. You're like, they stand for something similar as I do,
They
so
give
I
a shit
want to
about me,
support.
you know,
Yeah,
and yeah,
not
yeah, yeah. I mean, trying to get them to give a shit about anything, but yeah, like I said, it makes that connection. It's, especially everybody complains now. Oh, we're in an impersonal world, and it's like, well, if everybody's complaining, but yet they're still doing the same addicted to the phone bullshit, it's like, something's got to give. And for me, it's always been that I go to these festivals and I'm connecting with these people in person. It's still okay to talk to someone in person. It's like that hasn't gone the way of the dinosaur, and it's more important than ever. And if you want your art to sell, I cannot tell you enough how much these fans, it's why these conventions exist. I mean, if you look at it from a basic perspective of you wouldn't be sitting at a Comic Con if people didn't want to come to the Comic Con and enjoy the
agreed.
art, you
And not
know?
only that, I think, and this might lead to like one of my last questions. With the advent of AI and all these new um, tools that I'm seeing, knowing that there's a guy doing the work makes me feel better about spending too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that is more important now than ever getting out there because of AI and all that. I'm not too worried about AI. AI's never concerned me. When it came out and everybody freaked out, I'm like, over what? A, it's just ripping off other artists. It's not copyrightable. It's not, I mean, I'm not worried about it because my fans aren't all of a sudden going to be like, sorry, Bed Bath and Beyond just put out their new AI collection. Like they're not going to change all of a sudden and be like, hey, I'm into cool art and talking to artists and collecting tool posters and you're standing in line for 3 hours to get that poster. And all of a sudden they're
Like
not just
30
going to
hours.
change, or yeah, I'm sorry, I gave you the benefit of the doubt there. Like, um, they're not all of a sudden going to change. Maybe some will, but the ones that are actually buying the art, and especially the ones that are paying good money, big money, aren't going to start like taking the cheap version. It's like I said, it's a luxury product. It's
Sure.
nobody who has a lot of money is driving a Pinto. I mean,
Yeah.
unless they're just that kind of fucking cool dude, that wants
Well,
to like.
it's funny you should say this because there is some controversy with individuals in some of these groups that do go to a lot of shows and spend lots of time and hours and buy lots of expensive things, but then complain that they can't get somewhere because their van, or they need to sell this right away because their van broke down, or something of that nature.
I mean,
But
that's any collector, right? I mean,
sure,
once you get
sure, sure.
obsessed with a collection, things tend to go to the wayside. I don't need a new alternator. I need that poster, Like,
But I guess where I was getting to with the AI conversation, in where I think there may be some concern is that it's getting in, let's say like cameras, right?
Mhm.
The 20 years ago, the difference between a cinema camera and a video camera that you could get at Best Buy, I mean, they were miles apart,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Now I can buy a camera, and I have a camera that, if set up correctly, is almost indistinguishable between $100,000 cinema camera, right?
Yeah.
Um, which again, it's the person using it, but with some of these AI tools, people may not be using AI to rip off art, but may make it easier for the average person to be more artistic and come up with ideas and execute things, projecting, and not only projecting, but taking AI art and then projecting it and then redoing it yourself. I've heard of this before. Um,
Yeah, I mean that's just lame.
uh,
That's it's going to happen. When digital art came out and everybody could use the delete button or it's one reason I don't color digitally, because when I do a painting, I have to actually make a decision. I don't get to experiment. And if I screw something up, I got to buff it out and then redraw it and reset, So for me, putting out art, I have to make decisions. Now in the sketch phase and Procreate, that's fine. That's what I'm sketching anyway. I'm going to be erasing and whatnot. So that I don't mind. I can see that became a useful tool for me because it made it more efficient and it helped me realize my vision on canvas because I was able to project it and get exactly what I wanted. So in that aspect, you're just using the tools. And when digital art came out, I mean, DeviantArt's a great example. There's 40 million people on there because digital art gave a lot of people the ability to do something on their computer. 39.99999 million of those people aren't doing anything. They're not going anywhere. They're not. It all comes down to they're not. They don't have a vision, which is something that comes from your head. You can't get that from digital or AI. They don't have a plan. They don't know business. They're not out there interacting with fans. They don't know how to set up a studio or get prints done so it's the other 99% of the stuff that goes into being an artist that makes me not afraid of AI. People for years have been putting out millions and millions of pieces of art. That's great. But if, like you said, the artists that tend to rise to the top are the more outgoing that have that own, personal style that they've developed. And that story is what drives people to buy their art, and I go when I have to sell somebody, if they're like, "Well, AI could da da da," I just make them feel like shit for buying it. I'm like, "You just bought the cheap version," It's like, would you have sex with a sex robot? I mean, that's a cheap version of a real woman, right? Like, it's gross, creepy, and weird. And I just try and make that comparison with AI. I'm just like, you're buying something that's ripping art off from other artists, and there's no feeling, there's no humanity to it. And, you get into that conversation with them about like the importance of it. It's like everybody complains about everything going on in the world, from politics, religion, war, all that. It's like buying art from an artist. This is your one chance to support one of the purest, last honest jobs or crafts out there, that somebody can literally sit down with a blank piece of paper and change your emotional state. So if that's important to you, and if your mental well-being and I mean, everybody's a mess these days, but you look at a nice painting or a good piece of art and the story behind it, or the person, you're helping an artist or you're making that connection with them. I think that, it's a small step, but it's one of those ones that's necessary to keep this civilization going. Not to put the weight of the world on artists' shoulders, but and musicians and dramatists and writers, and I'm not just saying just
well,
artists, but
well, it's not only artists; it's the rest of the art community.
mhm,
I think is really what you're saying is you're saying use the tools, but don't be lame. I mean, is the best way I could say it.
that's the
Like, there's going to
T-shirt.
be,
Don't be lame.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, there's definitely useful tools like that can be used in. I think it's up to the artist to figure out what lines they should or should not be crossing
Yeah.
when it comes to AI. And then what you're also saying to the rest of the art community, whether or not you're a musician or a consumer or
Exactly. It's why wouldn't you? I mean, everybody wants craft beer and custom 5-blade razors and organic food and the best TV out there. It's why wouldn't your art fall in the same category? And it's something that is actually created. It's not just some product. It's not just some it's like everybody wants these bougie experiences or these custom experiences in their life. well, I get my food delivered every week and it comes in a pink bow, and but yet I'm going to download AI and just print it out and put it on the wall. It's like it comes down to, like I said, about assessing your life and making sure every aspect of it is working together, not some hippie harmony shit, but kind of like
It
that,
sounds it
making sure
sounds
it
pretty.
it definitely is, um because if one thing is off, it does affect,
Yeah,
the person, yeah, use the tools. It's great. AI is not going to cave the art world in. The CD, the tape, the recordable didn't kill the music
yeah.
industry. I mean, streaming kind of screwed the artists out of a lot of money, but
Oh yeah, that was
so
definitely a
there's
big one.
not saying there's certain things that haven't really done it in for certain musicians, and I feel bad for them, but you know what that's done? They've gotten out and toured a lot more.
Well, that's the other thing I've noticed, and it's actually a film I'm working on currently. Is since streaming has become its thing, bands have had to switch to other avenues of revenue, right?
Yeah.
And one of the big ones is now posters. So there's this whole new community and homeostasis of poster and artist and musician that now have to work together.
Yeah.
Um,
But look what opportunity that opened up for artists.
yeah, exactly.
So
That's
it's
what I mean.
crazy how technology can change in one industry and open and kind of close a door maybe and make it harder for that industry or that particular, musicians, but it's opening up this whole new door, this whole new side of things for artists.
Yeah, like I can't sell a CD, but you know what? 750 people will buy every show a poster.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's visually bringing and what's cool what I like to see is album artwork went away because CDs went away. Now vinyl's still doing pretty well, people collect vinyl and whatnot. But it's almost bringing back having album art, which was one of the coolest things that, when I was buying music in the '90s and whatnot, I couldn't wait. What's the album art gonna look like? What's it look like on the inside? What are the liner notes gonna look like? And like when I got the Downward Spiral and Nine Inch Nails and that artwork was incredible. And then you opened it up and we're like, whoa, and stuff and just all the little secret things they would put in or and so the posters, streaming kind of took music in a way where they had to come up with different revenue, which took them to the arts, which is now making them more artful and I think make the
yeah,
bands look more rich,
I, I I couldn't agree
more
more.
well-rounded. It's like here's their music, but then all these artists that they're picking are an extension of that. So it's like here's who Adam Jones loves, artwork wise, and so you're actually getting a kind of a behind the scenes look too and into their mind as to what kind of art they appreciate as well. And I think that that's a connection, for the fans to the band.
I think you should start making Nine Inch Nail posters and just sending them to them until they pick one.
I would love to, There are some other industrial bands that uh, I have connections with that I bet I could do a poster for, and I'm just yeah, when I get the time,
I
that's the whole
Yeah,
thing.
I feel like you have enough going on anyways.
Yeah, but it is one
But
thing I would love to do a series of posters just paying tribute, even if they don't get published. Like it'd be cool to be like, hey, here's my KMFDM, my ministry, my Front 242, my and being like, these are the bands that influenced me, and then maybe the bands would reach out or I reach out to them and say, hey, would you guys like to put together a collection of or a
for
little into
yesterday,
because we're all busy.
yeah. What I will say is what we didn't touch on, and I can cut this in, but what is your book about?
Oh
What is your
yeah, let me talk a
podcast?
little bit about that.
What is your podcast and book about?
So the book is I decided to sit down and go and it kind of parlays into like what you were asking earlier about being an artist. And for me it was like I'm starting to meet other artists that are, in certain industries that are doing kind of the same things that I'm doing and I'm not seeing a lot of originality and I'm like I need to write this book about my last, let's say, I think it's 27 years of my art career. Like from the time I landed in New Orleans, that was really when I was off and running and trying to discover who I was as a person because I knew that is what was going to make great art. And so it's a collection of all the crazy stuff that I've been through in order to be the person that can create great art. So it kind of gives people a little, not to say you have to go out and be a complete lunatic to be a great artist, but it just dives into like how much travel and seeing different things and tasting different foods and meeting all those cool people at dive bars, or not just sitting in your room thinking that you're going to create great art when all you have to look at is four walls. Granted, your imagination is a pretty vast empire, but you will be surprised at how much it helps to get out there. So it's about almost 30 years of just stories of on the road, and then it kind of gets into like more of the business side in the end of the book. So it'll talk about selling and pricing, but all done through funny stories and stuff, people I've had to deal with that have tried to hammer me on price and how I dealt with it. And so that I want to get that book out, and then that is going to be kind of the kickoff for a podcast. It's going to be called Drink Tickets, which is what they used to pay me in when I was live painting. So I thought that'd be a nice homage to my early paychecks.
They did the same thing when I was in a band.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So everybody knows, and it's something I think, when I was kicking around the title, I was like, Drink Tickets. That's got to be it. So, and
That's
yes,
a
I
good
grabbed
one.
the website and I have all the socials. So yeah, so the book, I'm about 40,000 words in right now, and it'll probably be double that. I'm hoping before I go on tour next year to have it shopped out. I would actually like to shop it out to a bigger publisher, if I could. I look at it. I just finished Kitchen Confidential again from Anthony Bourdain. That's probably a best comparison. It'd be like my Kitchen Confidential for the art world, and then hopefully that'll parlay into this podcast where I'm basically bringing artists on to do interviews, or I'll just have my own kind of rants about the business and psychology of being an artist. So more of all the business stuff that I've been through. Um, at MJ BizCon, I just met a intellectual property lawyer who said he'd be happy to come onto the podcast and talk about that side of things. And so it's going to be covering everything they don't teach you in art school and nobody really wants to talk about, but is necessary.
Those are definitely the subjects that I would that I'm trying to at least.
Yeah, it's a subject that needs to be talked about more. I mean, it's great to hang out and go to cons and do all the fun stuff, but then you also hear the same sob stories every year about, oh, it was a slow year, or this or that, and it's like, well, did you do anything different? Did you hire somebody to help? Did you what? Nobody really has that
You know,
conversation.
no.
Sitting around at the
Well,
pub with other artists, nobody's like, hey, you guys get a new accountant? Because it's not fun,
no. Sorry, I'm coming. I seen it coming. Um, plug yourself. That's what I was gonna say.
Sure.
Can you give everyone a plug?
Yeah. Yeah, DeviantArt, search Sean Dietrich. You can actually see the gallery. That's kind of the mega gallery of everything that I've done, or a good chunk of it. Sean Dietrich Art, SEAN, spelled the right way. Dietrich, spelled Diet Rich, easy way to remember it. And then Art, ART. Uh, that's my website. And then at Sean Dietrich is my Instagram. That's about all you need to know as far as what I use. I do have.
Before the Alabama guy,
Yeah, exactly. No, that was
because
the
I
thing when that other Sean Dietrich came out. So if you go to SeanDietrich.com, that is the red-bearded gentleman that writes about the South and sings Christian tunes, or I don't know what he does. But that is not me. But once he started to get traction and SEO and all that, I went and just scooped every social media thing I could.
yeah,
And anytime anything new comes out, I just go and grab it whenever.
smart.
So
Which leads me to kind of the wrapping this up is how smart I again, we have only met a couple of times, but or the one time, and we've chit
yeah,
chatted and you know, but I'm very impressed with the mentality you bring to your view on art because it's not just about the art itself, which it is, but
yeah,
there's other aspects to keep yourself safe and you know keep yourself content and oh, whatever the
it's a tough profession, and
yeah
it's it's why your parents look scared when you say you're going to be an artist, and even as an artist, like I'm glad my daughter wants to be a lawyer. I'm like, I'm like, please don't be an artist. No, but if they
Well,
wanted to, I would totally support it, of course.
sure.
But
I
it's
guess what I'm getting at is yes, it is scary to be an artist, but there are ways to, uh, you know, get into different avenues. You don't have to just do art prints.
no,
You don't have to just do originals. You can work.
you can do whatever you want. That's the great thing about being an artist. I mean, you do whatever the hell you want. Work with whoever you want. Write to whoever you want and say, "I love your band. I want to do a poster. Hey, Adidas, I want to put out. I wear Adidas. I would love to do some shoe designs for them. Have some art. I don't know. I mean, it's limitless, and that's I think what is so wonderful. But I also think that's what's so heavy about it is as well. Which what do I do? And I think a lot of artists have that issue, and but yeah, that's the brilliant thing about it is you can do whatever you want. Just make sure you take the time to really be there for your career. You have to nurture it. It is a child in the sense, it needs watering like a plant. It needs to grow. You need to learn the business side. You don't need an MBA, but you need at least to learn how to talk to people to negotiate a contract or get a good lawyer or have a buddy that's a lawyer that you give them artwork or put the effort into it. That
Yeah, just like you.
yeah, I know it's scary, sales and all that. I've told artists before too. I'm like, just everybody's got an obnoxious friend. Bring them along. Let them be your salesperson, or let them be at designer con, taking the questions, fielding the questions for you. Maybe you're working on a sketch and they have some questions, and your friend can be like, "Oh yeah, let me tell you about what he's working on right now." And da, da, da.
It's a
It's
great
so
idea.
it's a great idea, and
Yeah.
they'll do it for beer money probably, or just to
Or
get
art.
into designer con. Like
Right.
so. Yeah,
Well,
there's
Sean,
100 different ways to do it. There's no one set path. Have fun, but yeah, definitely treat it right and treat it with respect. Your career, and it'll treat you well back.
thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
And people perceive it to be boring.
Yeah,
But I don't think that's boring.
no,
Well, Sean, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it probably more than you do. And I appreciate you what's the word, being persistent with me. Um,
Yeah, no, if there's an audience and I can reach it, I'm in. I think it's
and
important.
it's paying off for sure
Yeah, and what you're
for you.
doing is important. Anybody that's out there spreading the good word of art or covering it in some way, it helps us and
And I
artists.
try.
We're appreciative.
Yeah, my goal is just to learn. Again, coming from a background that is not necessarily artistic or creative, it's my goal to learn. Learn to do it, learn to learn how to be creative in maybe a visual way or a technical way, and just figure out what makes creative people tick.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Right. Alrighty, my friend. I'll be in touch.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you, good sir. Spiral Out Podcast is produced by me, your host, Chris West, edited by me, researched by me. Everything is pretty much just done by me. Go to our website, spiraloutpod.podbean.com. Follow us on Instagram at spiral_out_pod. Facebook, Spiral Out Podcast. And again, if you want to see some of the images associated with this episode, click the link in the show notes and it'll take you there. Again, thank you for listening. Spiral Out. Pod dismissed. Wait, that's another show.